Colonel Hariharan is a retired military intelligence officer, served as the head of intelligence of the Indian Peacekeeping Force from 1987 to 1990. He is associated with the Chennai Center for China Studies and the South Asia Analysis Group. On July 29th, 1987, the Indo-Lanka Accord was signed with an understanding that the Sri Lankan government would devolve powers on the Indian model to a new merged northern and eastern province to be called the Northeast Province, granting official status to the Tamil language through the 13th Amendment to the Sri Lanka's constitution. In your opinion, what do you believe are the mistakes Rajiv Gandhi made in his execution of the Indo-Lanka Accord? Prabhakaran, for example, stated that whether or not the LTTE accepted the Indo-Lanka Accord, the Indian government was determined to put it into effect. Was Rajiv Gandhi's biggest blunder not giving the LTTE, the Tamil community, and the Sinhalese, the parties who would be affected by the accord, direct input when drafting the Indo-Lanka Accord?
You see, we have the advantage of hindsight in analyzing the Indo-Sri Lanka affairs of that period. At that time, many believed that Rajiv Gandhi had an understanding with J.R. Jayawardena, which was not put down on the accord, to devolve powers to the provinces based upon Indian model. Actually, the Varadaraj Perumal government had taken this up, this supposed to be a promise, and repeatedly projected this request to New Delhi, but New Delhi did not respond positively, because I think Rajiv was in his way out, Rajiv Gandhi, of power, and the new dispensation was not very happy with Indian intervention. So he will be, Varadaraja Perumal is the right person to answer this question. My problem is with the TULF, Tamil United Liberation Front. It was politically savvy, but in the entire period, it was nitpicking on the sidelines. They also might be able to answer this question, but it doesn't exist in its whole form. Mr. Amarthalingam might have answered it. I doubt whether Mr. Sampandan would take on this question. The accord, of course, was flawed in many ways. I have written about it and spoken, even in Colombo. But it showed Rajiv Gandhi's good intention alone were not enough in evolving solutions. This is his. And I feel he was always in a hurry to produce results than think through the problems. This could be due to his lack of political experience to deal with a personality like J.R., really a wily and astute leader. And J.R. was a past master in the art of survival also, political survival. So, basically, Indian approach in signing the accord, to my mind, was flawed because it underwrote a solution on Sri Lanka's internal issue outside its control. So I think basically this is a flawed approach due to any agreement, any international agreement. This was pointed out by Mr. Narasimha Rao, late Mr. Narasimha Rao, who was Human Rights Development Minister in his cabinet when he was shown the draft. Of course, Rajiv ignored it. Before the accord was signed, India did make efforts. We should note it tried to help Sri Lankans themselves, that is the government, and the Tamil separatists and political parties work out a solution of their own. And the Thimphu conference is a good example. But that is not only one of many attempts. All these attempts failed because none of the Sri Lankan stakeholders were willing to go the extra mile to resolve the issue. JR refused to see the big picture because it did not suit him. And Tulf played political Dicks and Drakes with India because Prabhakaran had rendered it impotent. As always, Prabhakaran wanted to be the cock of the heap, accountable to only himself. Thus, Sri Lanka missed an opportunity to work out a solution without bloodshed. But this is not the only occasion, that the Tamil and Sri Lanka political grandstanding coming in the way of evolving a peaceful solution. Their collective failure to approve President Chandrika's 2000 constitutional draft is, to my mind, was a very big mistake. And they paid, I suppose, easily 100,000 lives for this mistake because the political parties...
Or the 1995 ones were much more appropriate, much more suitable. The original GL Nilan package in 1995.
No, I agree. I will come to it later. But this was actually approved by everybody. When in the last minute, Ranil decided to renege on it, carried out a Padayatra, and you know the history better than me. So that is why I took the 2000 constitution, because 1995 had got the heckles up of Synodas. But that was the beginning actually. The Sri Lankans have told me the 2000 constitution was evolved out of that.
I think Balasingham had complained that Anton Balasingham had complained that it was too watered down. The 2000 proposal.
My point is the art of negotiation is to you have a high pitch. I wish. Getting to Yes, you should read the book Getting to Yes. One of the great negotiators, corporate negotiators, have said you pitch high and make concessions so that whatever is the bare minimum is acceptable minimum is there, so that the other side is enabled to meet you halfway. That attitude, to my mind, very rarely insurgent groups exhibit. Only in Mizo National Front, Laldangia had shown this. Of course, he became a chief minister later. So, LTTE just did not want to make a compromise. So, but I think, we must know. I think that basically the problem with Indo-Sri Lanka Accord, since we are discussing this, was India used the accord as a tool to achieve its strategic goal, to keep Americans off Indian Ocean region. Probably this might have been due to Soviet request. But this I am saying, you see, when you cannot have a strategic goal which is different totally from, if you see this is evident from the wording of the accord itself. So I think that actually watered down because it confused India's priorities, and it also clouded the genuine desire of India, and particularly Rajiv Gandhi, to help Tamils to get their just rights within a united Sri Lanka. So India's priorities were distracted, and its attention to ensure end game in Sri Lanka after IPKF was inducted was not there. In addition to this, India had to oblige JR's request to send troops to save him from a possible coup. I remember very clearly. This was one of the things I was told when I left New Delhi. Though it is not written anywhere. Indian naval ships were, with a battalion of troops was kept in readiness in Colombo, off Colombo waters. So what I'm saying is, there is a confused strategic narrative in the accord. So you cannot, when strategy is basically single-minded pursuit of an overall goal. Here you are distracted by 2-3 things. And many of them you will not be able to see through. And as regards Prabhakaran's statement you quoted, I don't understand the rationale at this point. India and Sri Lanka are sovereign powers. They have the right to sign and enforce any agreement they want between them. Where does Prabhakaran come in this? He was neither a party to the agreement nor one who promoted it.
Well,
in Hindi we say,
well, of course, if he wasn't going to his argument, if he wasn't involved in the agreement, he would obviously retaliate because he...
Pardon me for interruption.
Mm-hmm.
You know why he excluded himself in every dialogue process? Because he does not equate himself with other groups, other Tamil groups. In what way they are less?
You're correct. Yeah.
Padmanabha was less Tamilian just because he didn't behave like Prabhakaran and Koto to him. I do not agree with this. So there is no point in arguing about it. I have seen all these groups at work, first person. So it is easy to talk about Prabhakaran now. You see, his standing at that time of signing the accord was only one of the 4 powerful Tamil militant groups. There were 33 groups after the 1983 program, Colombo program against Tamils. He was only, the 4 was there, and already he was killing the leaders of the other groups even before the accord. Even though the Tamil Nadu leader, DMK leader, Col.Ramani requested him before Tello leader Sabaratnam was killed, kindly do not kill him, he is my friend. He ignored it. You see, you cannot negotiate with a guy like this. How do you negotiate?
You make a valid point.
What does he carry to comment on this accord, which is an effort to bring peace? I cannot go with this reasoning of Prabhakaran. And what credibility is there that we should follow his dictum so that incrementally he will surrender weapons? Does it stand to the heads of state to accept this kind of thing from a force which goes around killing? I don't understand this.
Yeah, you make a valid point. You make a valid point. Had Prabhakaran was determined to be the sole representative of the Tamil people by killing off leaders of rival faction, and by doing so, he wanted to, remain supreme. And what he should have done was form a consensus with all the rebel leaders and approach India.
This is what at Thimphu it was attempted.
Yeah.
He didn't. He walked out after 2 days, and he sent, of course, some other representative who does not represent. I mean, with all good intentions, he is a good man. He doesn't represent LTTE. At every place, he has done this. In every negotiation.
India and Sri Lanka, they had signed an agreement that brought the Indian Peacekeeping Forces into Sri Lanka to accept the surrender of arms by Tamil militants as a part of the general ceasefire. Prabhakaran had reportedly stated that he was not keen to give up all the LTT's weapons, but he would hand over some and see the accord being implemented. To your knowledge, was this true? And if so, was this an unreasonable demand on the part of Prabhakaran to give up some of the weapons and then gradually give up more of the weapons as part of the accord would be implemented?
Actually, I never believed Prabhakaran, frankly. Whatever he said about intention to see the accord in action, I won't believe, because I don't think he would have surrendered weapons, basically, whatever be the circumstance. Actually, my contacts in LTTE had told me also at that time, they were very unhappy about it, as they felt many among the tigers, Tamil tigers, felt they should not be fighting India. And that anybody will tell you who has dealt with Prabhakaran that his dream is to create an independent kingdom and establish himself as the sole arbiter to liberate Tamils. So he never accepted this. I had earlier spoken about Sri Lanka and India equating LTTE with other groups, and even when Premadasa gave a lease of life to LTTE, he armed Prabhakaran, and he got the Indian troops off the back of LTTE, and LTTE assassinated him because this basic issue of LTTE being the sole organization to negotiate the Tamil rights. That was the crux of the issue, and even Norwegians succeeded only because Norwegians arm twisted to Sri Lankan government to accept LTTE as the sole representative at the talks. That is how LTTE came to the table. So I think this is the basic problem. So I don't think LTTE, when it says it will gradually give up arms to ensure the accord is enforced in full, is at best a joke. I don't just simply buy it. How can politicians buy it? They have to contest elections. Yeah.
How did the Indian Peacekeeping Force respond when they had found out that Premadasa was arming the LTTE? How did the Indian Peacekeeping Force respond to that? How did the Indian government respond to that?
Our response was muted, and we kept. Actually, I had given a recording of a conversation from President's office, Sri Lankan President's office, to the troops, Sri Lankan troops, to pass on information about LTTE to come and collect arms at a point. Actually, I played it to Ranjan, who was the foreign minister, and we used to have periodic meetings with him and with the defense secretary and all. So we played this that time. And what can he say? He didn't accept that stand, but it was beyond him. Now, Premadasa was, I think, basically gullible to LTTE's overtures, the influence, because Premadasa himself, if you see the rise of Premadasa, he is one of the few Sri Lankan presidents who came from the bottom of the till in Sri Lanka's caste equation. So he wanted to do great things, but really his housing project was the only constructive project a president had supervised. So I'm not a great admirer of his methods. He is another man who used to twist elbows and get things done. But what I'm saying is, probably he wanted to have a grand vision of freeing Sri Lanka from Tamil, the LTTE and Tamil separatism by peaceful means, and probably that's what misled him, I think. So we really, because the political climate was changing in in India and in Tamil Nadu, the opposition was coming to power, and it was in the last days. So the government of India's response was, already it was sidelining Sri Lanka issue. Only IPKF was paying the price by sitting there, rather, because we had almost completed our operations. Once these guys were pushed into the Alampil jungle, everything was restored, and it was a political process Sri Lanka had to do, and 13th Amendment was in place, and the elections were held, provincial elections, and there was to be a referendum which was never held, never conducted by JR. Yes. So it was and the nation, both the nations had voted against, in a way voted against the accord, because they brought in the opposition. Both Sri Lanka and this was the climate in which he was helping. So it actually justified the rationale of Indian opposition which came to power. The earlier we pull out, the better. That's how it is.
It has long been reported that the Indian Peacekeeping Forces committed egregious human rights violations in Sri Lanka, such as rape and torture of civilians in the north, shelling, mass killing by the Indian Peacekeeping Force in hospitals, etc. At the same time, it has been asserted that a lot of these allegations were largely exaggerated by the LTTE as a propaganda tool to organize resistance against the Indian Peacekeeping Force. What is your response to the human rights violations committed by the Indian Peacekeeping Force against Tamils in the north? To what extent do you believe the Indian Peacekeeping Force committed atrocities in Sri Lanka?
There is no yardstick. War means violation of human rights. Let us be clear about it. We should see it always, I say, when we examine issues in hindsight. You compare it with Sri Lankan the human rights violations, which was good or bad. It doesn't gel. So that is one thing. And secondly, I have always mentioned this. I have mentioned in Sri Lanka in the Kotlavala Defense Academy also. And this issue I have discussed in public and in Sri Lanka itself and in Sri Lankan media, that who are these soldiers, Sri Lankan soldiers and Indian soldiers? They come from villages where the human rights does not exist in the neoliberal form they would like to have. Their fundamental rights are curtailed by the government, by the society, by their religions, by the elders, by the feudal systems. It is like that. We try to, the soldier undergoes 1.5 years or 2 years training. We try to impart that. But in typical army fashion, we would say this ABC is the violation. If such cases take place, you will be court-martialed, and there will be a due process for court-martialing. That's what is done. In Sri Lanka's case also it was done. In 1971 war in Bangladesh, we did at least 2 brigadiers known to me were deprived of the rank and thrown out of the army, which is a very big, for lifetime they are tarnished, much worse than imprisonment. And in J&K, these have been forwarded, the process is, the State Human Rights Commission have collected these complaints and forwarded to the army and army had prima facie how many the allegations are there, correct. So they are shortlisted. There were thousands. I mentioned this to Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa in Kotlavala Academy after his speech. So why I am mentioning is there is no secret about it. So I say when Sri Lankans write and tell me that why not we inquire, I said please go ahead, inquire that period. But you should bear in mind it is 25 years, more than 25 years. So you factor that. And what was the state of human rights in Sri Lanka vis-a-vis these violations preceding that Indian IPKF this thing? But still I feel at least in two instances Indian Army could have acquitted itself better by having a public inquiry or having a third party inquiry. One was the hospital thing, killing. Actually, during the operation, just across the hospital, Mr. Rajendra Dorsami, our family friend, whom I knew for a number of years, was killed. So, in that instance, and in Velvati Thurai, later, our army patrol, which was ambushed within the town. After that, and it lost fellows, the battalion retaliated in a very heavy-handed fashion. And this also, because there was a lot of Velvati Thurai is the heartland of the Tamil militancy, we could have acquitted ourselves better with a better process. But these are all learnings after the event. That's my point. We should not condone. I have not condoned. My bosses have, there are guys have been punished in Mizoram. The guy, one of my bosses, he thrashed a Mizo militant who was caught because he won't answer. And the guy became deaf. The officer he lost near seniority, he was never promoted for this. And army court-martial process is the fastest. I have seen this happening. But you require evidence. I used to answer back to, I don't know why it was referred. I was not the discipline, but because Amnesty International in those days was in infancy, it used to write to me. I used to, for a number of years, the MI would refer it to me. I used to answer them. You require, even now, I told the Tamil diaspora people, when they talk of human rights violations, massacre, genocide, I said it will take a number of years. You require primary data collection, name, age, affected persons, witnesses for every instance. And you go to ICC, it is actually biased against, I don't want to sound racist, only guys who are punished there so far is the guys who did not accept the Western dispensation. Mm-hmm. Like in the Serbs or the Rwandan Hutus and one nun, to punish one nun who connived in the genocide. Firstly, you must conform to the UN definition of genocide itself, what you are saying. So it is a very complicated process. When politicians make this statement, they are making a statement for rabble-rousing. They do not understand the mechanics involved. They refuse to understand it because it doesn't suit them. And I'm sorry to say, Tamils are no great examples for ensuring human rights. Mm-hmm. When they have tolerated so many human rights violations in their midst, perpetrated by Tamils. So, the credibility during all these years, when LTTE was ruling the place, literally, they tolerated. In what way? Just because the guy is Sinhalese, going in a bus, or for that matter, the novices who are novice monks. Killing is justified. In what way? Will Ilambis come sooner? Who question this? If I say this, they will say I am a traitor. And that is irrelevant. This is the reaction we get from Tamil intellectuals, continue to get. Because this is where I believe in Gandhi, that we should first set ours right. This is what the one Muslim leader in Sri Lanka asked. Why haven't Tamils apologized? That would have created a better ethnic situation. You are asking others to apologize. You apologize. Doesn't matter. You are not in LTTE at that time. That is fine print. So, it is an open-ended question.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say this was better or that was better. Why still IPKF didn't do? It was there to fulfill its mission, not to ensure human rights violations do not take place. There are other organizations for that with great influence. That's my answer. It may not satisfy.
What was the relationship between the Indian Peacekeeping Force and anti-LTTE groups, namely EPRLF, ENDLF, and TILO? Why wasn't the Indian Peacekeeping Force able to influence these three rebel groups to destabilize the LTTE?
First, we had good functional relations with EPRLF, TILO, and ENDLF. There is no doubt about it. They had supported the accord as the best option for Tamils and surrendered their arms. Of course, plot excluded itself because Uma Maheswaran at the time was busy negotiating. But actually at the functional level, plot guys also was helping us, though they were on their own for most part. So, but we must understand that qualitatively they differed. Though they imitated, in many respects, they imitated the LTTE. And, but the slowly LTTE, by denuding the leadership and having an excellent propaganda machinery, otherwise EPRLF and Eros at that time, was better placed to emerge as the most powerful group because they were using the diaspora first. They had trained with the PLO, and for instance, Padmanabha himself told me that he was trained by George Habash in Palestine. So they had all the credentials to succeed. They didn't succeed because qualitatively LTTE led by Prabhakaran was most ruthless in its action, single-minded in its pursuit, no question of democracy existing in the hierarchy, whereas all others had to make compromises with the government, with both the governments, both the armies, various political parties, and with other groups. It worked out like that. So, and Prabhakaran, all said and done, for all his fault, he was the most charismatic leader, though he was not necessarily the most the wisest. But who cares? Public, he knew the Tamils accept strong authority meekly than the participatory thing. You can see it in politics, the way politics is done in Tamil Nadu. So, so he could really inspire the cadres much more by his action. It is something like IS inspiring the Muslims the world over. That's how the He was able to strengthen the diaspora network. So they were qualitatively different. There is no question of they directly attacking LTTE and doing. You know what I mean? Because LTTE was, firstly, the secrecy itself. You must give full marks. And the paranoia about security. If a guy loses a gun, he will be dead. I have seen videos, LTTE videos. He will kill himself. Where do you get that kind of commitment? Not with these groups. Though they were aspirants for independent Elam, Tamil rights, everything. But aspiration alone is not sufficient to produce an organization like a ruthless missionary.
Why wasn't the Indian peacekeeping force able to stop Prabhakaran from killing off leaders in rival factions? For example, the elimination of the plot leadership in Bentikola by the LTTE.
You mentioned this. Same thing. We were not, wherever they asked for protection, we were not refusing. But people must ask, many were hesitant to ask Indian protection for fear it would attract LTT retaliation. For instance, Amarthalingam's protection was Sri Lankan police was providing in Colombo, and that did not help him. So, it is, I know I had, in case of at least a couple of leaders, I had told them, when I got to know who were the LTT guys coming to finish them off, I had warned them. I was very disappointed in the night when I woke up Padmanabha and told him 2 guys were coming to knock off. He told me, என்னைக்கு இங்க வந்து சேர்ந்தாச்சோ ஏக்கத்துல அன்னைக்கே செத்தாச்சு. You see this kind of attitude, what is the use? This is the attitude of many cadres, because LTT has made the suicide culture a virtue. I can't think of any other answer.
It was a common belief of the Sri Lankan Army security forces that the Indian peacekeeping force did not take an interest in protecting the Sinhala villages bordering Tamil areas. For example, when the LTT was planning to strike the Moraviwa village on March 3rd, 1988, Sri Lankan intelligence had intercepted the LTT communications and passed this information to the Indian peacekeeping force, but no action had been taken by the Indian peacekeeping force, and the LTT killed 15 civilians and injured 10. Why wasn't the Indian peacekeeping force...
I can understand this. I don't know whether you know the ethnic history of that region. This is that... bordering the dollar farm and all. There are a lot of disputes about this thing. It is not because of that. It is outside our area of operation. Why would we go and protect? Why doesn't the Sri Lankan army take it upon itself? It never protected these villages properly, much later also. This had been the scene of LTT activity as late as 2008 or 2007, I remember. These villagers were killed. 2006, I think. They were killed. Why didn't they protect? They were already having the Prevention of Terrorism Act. They had armed these villages. So, it is, I will not be able to answer this question. When our own guys are getting killed within the northern and eastern provinces, the political leaders and others were getting killed by LTT. We had a bigger task of eliminating LTT than go across the border. I can imagine what the headlines would be in Ireland, that Indians poaching into Sri Lankan territory, outside northern, in Sinhala territory. This is how the climate in Colombo was. The media was. The media was most unhelpful for the good intentions of the thing, because it is fashionable. to denounce any accord. That is it. I can't say more than that.
Did you have any relationship with Jayantha Dixit? It is stated that Dixit was hated by both the Indian Peacekeeping Force and RO operatives alike. Why was this the case? And Dixit was also hated by most people in Sri Lanka, as many Sri Lankans believed it was Dixit's manipulating which forced Jayawardena to sign the accord, as well as induct a foreign army in Sri Lanka.
I have met Mr. Dixit in Colombo a number of times. On occasions I have briefed him also on my perspective on Tamil militancy, what the leadership was doing and so on. And but you must know the hierarchy. There was no question of IPKF or R&AW operatives hating him or loving him. So we operate under our change of command. So if there is anything, our leadership in New Delhi would put across the point to the Ministry of External Affairs, and the Ministry of External Affairs would put across to Dixit. This is how the thing works. So there is no question. Sri Lankans might believe that. And but all said and done, Dixit was a very, very astute man, and who could match the shrewdness of JR? So no wonder they got along famously like a house on fire. So, and they used each other, I think. Actually, later I met Mr. Dixit when he wrote his book on his Sri Lanka days, when it had come for the book release, and I didn't touch upon this, but he had very deep knowledge and excellent experience. You should not trivialize that, because of each one has got a personality, and I don't think it is Dixit manipulation was behind JR signing the accord. I wish it were as simple as that. The manipulation should have worked later to release those 12 LTTE guys who were caught by Sri Lankan Navy and who committed suicide, the 12 important leaders, also Prabhakaran. It didn't work at that time. But I don't know whether you have met JR. He is what the Americans call, he is a guy who can sell ice cream to the Eskimos in Arctic. He is that kind of guy. One of the best speakers, after dinner speakers I have heard. I have heard him 2-3 times. He is first class, a very sharp mind. So I don't think it can be manipulated.
It is alleged that Mahathir was being groomed by RO to take control of the LTTE, to oust Prabhakaran and take control of the LTTE. Is this true? To your knowledge, is it true? Was Mahathir being groomed by RO to take over the LTTE leadership? Was Mahathir colluding with RO? And was this the reason why he was killed?
I really don't know. When Mahathir was killed, I was totally out of touch with RAW or anything to do with intelligence. I had become a corporate trainer. So why I am mentioning this is, I have heard this from the media, I have heard this from LTTE, but LTTE is well known for its kangaroo courts. I don't know how far it's true. And no intelligence guy who has been my friend would tell. This is the nature of intelligence operations. Nobody would discuss this. I don't know, really. Nobody would believe me. But I don't go around asking. I am not doing a sting operation. So I never asked anybody. To my knowledge, it is within the realms of possibility, but I don't know whether it was actually done. For that matter, even almost all LTTE leaders were very well known to the RNAW at some stage or other. Even Prabhakaran too was very close to them. All of them had died. Not because they fell out. Most of it were their own doing. And even I had good friends in LTT who provided me information because they did not want LTT to fight India, which they thought was very stupid. So I did not spend much money in collecting intelligence. There was a many Tamils, Sri Lankan Tamils, consciously felt it was a very foolish thing to fight India. So I won't be able to give you the inside information if you expect that. On the question of Mathia, I don't know where you have met Mathia. Probably you were too young. Mathia was no darling. He was absolutely ruthless. He was a very close friend. I have met Mathia. I remember one old man, when we were on talking terms, one old man came to me. His son was EPRLF cadre, who was not even a fighting cadre. He was doing clerical duties in the EPRLF office. He was kidnapped by LTTE before we came. So this old man came to me and asked me, "Ayya, why don't you just ask him whether my son is dead or alive? If he is dead, I want to do I want to do his funeral ceremonies so that his soul rests in peace. This is all I am asking." So I asked Shankar, who always, Mathia will not directly talk to guys like me. I told Shankar, you kindly tell him. So Mathia heard this even before it was translated. Mathia said, "Ella and the Col.Ramani boy chavas tolluko." I don't know whether you understood. Mm-hmm. Ask the old man also to go and die. And they tell the colonel not to poke his nose on all these things. Let him do his job. This is what he said. He is absolutely ruthless. If he was killed, I have no tears to shed, frankly, whether justifiably or otherwise. He has killed many guys, and this is sort of a nemesis catching up.
On July 29th, 1999, exactly 12 years to the day that the Indo-Lanka Accord was signed, the LTTE killed Dr. Nilan Tiruchavam. You told me that you met Dr. Nilan Tiruchavam. Can you talk about Dr. Nilan Tiruchavam, your meeting with him, and how he became a victim of Sri Lankan party politics? Can you talk about that?
Surely. I have met for a short period Nilan, Dr. Nilan, I think is Neelakandam.
Yeah.
Was the name, first name. I have met him twice, and once along with, I think both vacations with Jamil Kalkat, and we discussed some constitutional, we tried to understand the political developments. So we have met many the TULF leaders like Amarthalingam and all these people. Amarthalingam was personally very well known to me, and it was a great loss, his killing. Another stupid mistake Prabhakaran ever made was to eliminate Amarthalingam. Similarly, we had two meetings with Dr. Nilan Tiruchavam, but Dr. Nilan Tiruchavam was a scholar, particularly on constitutional issues. So it was only to clarify some of the aspects. We did not touch upon other issues. So I would not claim to have known him, but his knowledge and erudition and contribution to the Constitution, particularly the 1995 draft, which was redrafted by Chandrika in 1998 as a draft constitution. It was actually, though it was not a federal constitution, I think his biggest contribution, along with Professor Paris, in drafting the 1995 constitutional draft, I thought was immense. In an interview in one of the Tamil channels, I had suggested that the present government of Maithripala Sirisena should simply take that 95, even 98 draft version of Chandrika as the basis for discussion, so that the ground, it had everybody's acceptance. The 98 draft, which was slightly watered down, and even in the last minute, the same Ranil Wickramasinghe went against it, and it was not put through. Even today, that has a relevant solution to Sri Lanka's political impasse. I don't know why they are not doing it. That was, to my mind, that was the biggest contribution to Nilan Tiruchavam, and by killing him, LTTE shot its own feet. Had he been alive, even in the peace process, he would have been a great value in advising the LTTE in the talks how to arrive at a workable solution. So this shows the anti-intellectual nature. If you see not only him, I can cite at least 10, 20 fellows, Tamil intellectuals who have been done to death, which benefited only Sri Lankan establishment, especially not the enlightened establishment, but the right-wing elements. So then it became easy for them to argue about Tamil terrorism threatening the sovereignty. So I think from that point of view, it is next to Rajiv Gandhi was Nilan's elimination did most damage to the Tamil cause. Of course, Appapillai Amarthalingam's elimination also, because he could actually, of course, many would disagree with me, but I have discussed with him threadbare his own, why he took a certain decision at certain stage. So there is no, that was also a very foolish thing. There are about 3-4 others who have been done to death. I think this is why LTTE lost the war, because it could not hear outside voices. The Nilan's thing was avoidable. It was a suicide bomb that killed him, if I remember correct, in a car when he was traveling. So it is a very tragic thing.
And what the LTT didn't realize is that when they killed Nilan Tiruchavam, or maybe this is what they did realize, but when they killed Nilan Tiruchavam, Chandrika, she had fewer and fewer Tamil advisors to really help her understand the Tamil issue, because during the Norway peace talks, the ISGA, when it was proposed, she completely dismissed it. when she was in control. Had she had more Tamil advisors like Nilan Tiruchavam, he probably would have saw the importance in negotiating with the ISGA, because he understood the need to negotiate with political proposals when they are put forth.
But the negotiation 2002 peace process negotiation itself, I do not agree. I told the Norwegians also, how can LTTE be the sole representatives of Tamils just because they have force? That was the first time the LTTE was recognized as the sole voice to decide the fate of Tamils. How about others, other political parties? How about a large segment of people, cross-section of Tamils? You are negotiating the fate with an agency which has got no rules. This is my reservation. I think this is one of the reasons why Government of India didn't participate. This is one of the reasons why Premadasa could not negotiate with LTTE. And it is not merely ISGA. We should see the political environment in which Chandrika and Ranil were operating. It was a cohabitation government when Chandrika was, the opposition was holding the prime ministership. So there was this what you call
rivalry,
visceral hatred between the two political parties at that peak, because Chandrika, she had a very bad, her tenure, some of the resounding defeats that the Sri Lankan army had faced. After the what is that, Elephant Pass disaster, and in Mullaitivu they lost. So she had these political compulsions, I feel. So she could not face it. Otherwise, among all the leaders, I think Chandrika Kumaratunga was one of those who you can't really brand as a racist. For that matter, even Ranil, they have balanced views, but they have a following among the what you call the conservative elements, both parties. So I won't pass judgment that she intentionally excluded. If you see progressively, the LTT have been, Gamini has been killed, the Lalita, they tried to kill, she herself lost one eye. Why would she take kindly to LTT's, and Lakshman Kadirgamar, he was a Tamil, he was speaking in a different voice, so he was eliminated by LTT. So I can understand her perception. That's why I'm saying it is easy now. This is the problem in analyzing history, current history, after the event. So it is not because she excluded, it is because LTTE eliminated them, those same voices among Tamils. Otherwise they would have come, she would have used. I don't think she was, she actually, when Mahinda Rajapaksa's rule, she had openly declared that her own life is not in safety. She went abroad and said this. I hope you know that.
Mm-hmm.
So she is a person. I don't think she has a great hang-up that it should be Sanila government. So I won't see it from that point of view. She could have given. You see, there was no confidence in each other between Ranil and Chandrika at that stage. During the peace process, Ranil didn't take into confidence. Ranil took a great risk. Professor Pires was the foreign minister, his foreign minister at that time. They took great risk in allowing LTTE parity status, which LTTE misused. So I think enough rope was given to LTTE. They hanged themselves. I don't think any political leader could have done any miracle with the ISDA proposal, because LTTE could have called someone then to the table. He is a man with a lot of concepts. All these people, Tamil politicians, there are many of them who can put up very sane arguments. But the LTTE wanted to consult Tamil diaspora only in framing the ISDA, and it is an extreme position. The ISDA, in any negotiation, you start from an extreme position and bring it down to a negotiable settlement. That's why I said that 95 Constitution was a very good settlement package.
But the UNP wouldn't support it. That had the UNP supported it, they wouldn't have. Chandrika would not have needed to have consulted.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You are very right. That is why I am saying even now, Ranil is in power, Maitri is also there. They can dust that package and put it. Ranil also had this. He is one of the permanent. He has lost more elections than anybody else, I suppose. At that time, that Padayatra he undertook. Correct me if I am wrong, if I remember correctly. And against the constitution, as though it is constitutional draft, as though it was the end of the universe. And he put a similar package. He was prepared to give a confederation and make Prabhakaran the head of the state during the peace process and give him everything. All powers within your province except for import, export and foreign exchange and defense. So which was even beyond the 2005 Constitution. So Prabhakaran ISDA, I don't think it was at any point they seriously LTTE considered it as a package that would come through. I don't know how far. Anyway, the architects are there in Singapore and in Paris and somewhere else, I suppose. They would be able to answer. I never believe they would LTTE seriously accept United Sri Lanka, because Prabhakaran wanted to be the architect of Tamil.
In 2009, during the final stages of the war, the LTTE used civilians as human shields. However, it has also been reported that the LTTE also used civilians as human shields during their battle with the IPKF. Is this correct? And if so, can you talk about it and how the IPKF responded to such actions by the LTTE?
During our actions, it was different. Except for Jaffna operation, the kind of conventional operation was not carried out. So in small actions, for a short while, LTTE had used. So totally the situation was quite different during our times. The LTTE adopted conventional warfare when it increased its uniformed cadres. In our times, all of them were not in uniform. Many of them were in a ragtag band. So it was quite different. I don't think the comparison of human shield, as was seen after in Kilinochchi operations during the Elam War, or later in Mullaitivu, it is there is a world of difference between what we did during IPKF and what Sri Lankan Army did. You see, because the type of warfare was different. So I don't think it would be productive to compare the human shields. This is, in our times, it was a guy trying to get out of a situation, particular situation. Whereas after Parantan fell, LTTE started moving people, lock, stock and barrel, to reinforce Kilinochchi with a human barrier. Then from Kilinochchi they moved to further up towards Mullaitivu side, and the human shield as you see we should understand the mindset of people. The LTTE does not see itself accountable to anybody, particularly the Geneva Convention and all. They apply to the signatories of the convention, where the norms of warfare are said to be observed, though they are often violated and investigated as an afterthought by the winner. So the type of warfare was more conventional in the Elam War last edition, and personally I feel that is why LTT lost, because in conventional operation everything was against them. I don't know why Prabhakaran probably overestimated his own strength and underestimated the capability of conventional forces, because conventional forces use hundreds of years of learning of warfare, and they are trained. Whereas after all, LTTE is an unconventional force. So there is a world of difference.
You had stated that you heard the LTTE order the killing of Rajiv Gandhi. I mean, for many years there was actually, a debate, among the community whether or not even the LTTE even killed Rajiv Gandhi. But you said you actually heard the LTTE order the killing of Rajiv Gandhi. In what manner did you receive this information? And upon receiving this information, what actions did you take in order to try to prevent the killing of Rajiv Gandhi?
Actually, we are binding up our headquarters in Chennai. Our Indian Peacekeeping Force, after it was withdrawn, we were being disbanded. Our headquarters was being reconstituted into a core headquarters, which was moved to Jammu and Kashmir. I actually went to Jammu and Kashmir and came back. Before that, one day there was this wireless interception units we had deployed in Chennai, which were monitoring the conversations of LTTE on both sides of the Park Straits. So one of the units, which was just had a few days to go, they brought me a tape, which I don't remember the exact wording, because many years have gone and I did not retain a tape. It was a cassette recording which said Rajiv Mandaila Podu. Mandaila Podu is the expression used for, you see LTTE goes around Mandaila Podu or dumping. Andala dump pannide. These are all orders for assassination. We have heard it too many times in their conversations. They used to meticulously keep a record also of the killings, very much like Nazis. And so I have heard this previously when they had ordered the plot fellows coming from Tamil Nadu in a boat to be killed in Mannar, and it happened. That's how it is. Since we were winding up, the unit was winding up, I was left with the cassette. So my commander told me, we don't have troops here, we have no responsibility, operational responsibility anymore. Because the headquarters was moving to, advanced headquarters was moving to Sri Lanka in J&K. And so you hand over the thing to the Intelligence Bureau, which was looking after internal intelligence in Tamil Nadu. So he was a good friend of mine. So I met him, the additional director, a very senior officer, a very experienced policeman. And we discussed, we played the thing in his office. And he said, it is not clear. The wording is not clear. And he said, why would LTTE do a foolish thing? I think that is where he wrongly assessed. I disagreed with him. I said, my responsibility as a military intelligence man, I would ensure I would take it as done thing and ensure all the precautions are taken. But in any way, he was calling the shot. It is his responsibility. So he said, leave it with me. And later when I was leaving the army, I never asked him what happened to the cassette. Because Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated few months after that, after I met him second time. I never thought of asking him. So I really don't know. There are practical problems, intelligence analysts face when they make glitches like this. 9/11 is a very glaring example. When American intelligence had, FBI had information from the world over, Australian intelligence had picked up Indian intelligence, various indications. So you put them together and you draw an assessment, whether it is possible or probable. If it is, many things are possible but may not be probable. So my friend must have decided it is not probable.
Former Indian National Security Advisor Shiv Shankar Menon, in his book on India's foreign policy, said about Sri Lanka, I quote, "The way the Sri Lankans fought the war, though criticized for its brutality in the final stages, might have taken a higher toll if delay and stalemate were brought about. Indeed, one must logically ask the question, would an earlier adoption of the more brutal methods of the last 30 months of the war have brought it to an earlier end and actually saved lives and minimized the war's deleterious effects?" This is a recurrent problem in statecraft. It is also the strongest justification for the use of atomic weapons to end World War II. Colonel Hariharan, do you believe that an earlier adoption of brutal methods may have brought an end to the war much sooner and saved more lives? The Indian Peacekeeping Force, for instance, were largely restrained from going on an all-out offensive against the LTTE in order to avoid civilian casualties due to pressure from Tamil Nadu. In retrospect, should the Indian Peacekeeping Force have gone on an all-out military offensive, regardless of the opinions of civilians in Tamil Nadu, to destabilize the LTTE and then work on achieving a political solution?
I have not read Shiv Shankar Menon's book, except for some excerpts. So I won't attempt to comment on what you are quoting without the context in which it was written. But as one who has spent most of his career in dealing with nearly 24 insurgencies in 3 countries, including Sri Lanka, I shall try to answer your question based upon my knowledge and experience. That is the limitation here. You see, there are a lot of romantic notions about glories of war and all. there should be no illusion about use of brutal methods in war, either directly or indirectly, to eliminate the enemy. That is the essence of war. Most of the time, victory comes to the side which puts more enemy soldiers out of action. The early closure of war is always used as a justification for the use of more and more lethal weapons. Americans tout the same excuse to justify their use of atom bombs that killed thousands in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that made Japan surrender to the Americans in the Second World War. That is a prime example. And it still continues. So we will forever continue to debate this because both conflict and variables of value system based in the right and wrong are part of life. There is no set norm. As regards, it may sound very cynical, but that is the truth. As regards IPKF, we received no instructions to minimize casualties. Because of political pressure from Tamil Nadu, Indian Army operates on directions from New Delhi, not on political pressures from states. So I think the Ministry of Defense would probably be able to answer the impact of Tamil Nadu politics and its pressure. And coming to winning wars against insurgents or regular forces, armies have to use superior force. This is ingrained in every soldier in his basic training. In spite of this, Indian Army generally uses minimum force against insurgents because of the country's peculiar national security decision-making process. That is why insurgencies in India seem to be never-ending. They have even continued for 2 generations, say in Nagaland, and left-wing extremism. These are 2 prime examples. The Indian political system itself shows immense patience to work out politically acceptable compromises with the insurgent groups. I do not want to go into it. They have made sheltering provisions in Constitution to reduce some of the pressures. The insurgent groups do join mainstream politics. It treats most of their minor aberrations, the state treats most of the minor aberrations of insurgents like extortion and kidnapping merely as a crime. This is how insurgencies in the Northeast have been managed all along. But the system is not without its merit. It reduces collateral damage to ordinary people as well as insurgents. Even though it may not succeed in eradicating the insurgent group, over a period of time, the group loses its credibility and its popular support withers away. This method does not make military sense, as it prolongs the agony of the people who bear the brunt of insurgent activity, and states' countermeasures curtailing or restricting public activity continues. But it suits the Indian style of laid-back and opaque process of decision-making, as well as national security environment in which political leadership trusts civilian bureaucracy more than the military in its national security decision-making process. Using maximum force is the accepted practice of the armies the world over. The Indian soldier is no exception. So, Indian method confuses him, which can have detrimental effect on the soldier's psyche. But politicians in India really care 2 hoots about such niceties of soldiering. So we plod along because we are Indian and Asian, who always manage, to get along with any system that is existing.
So
generally, Indian Army does not use heavy weapons, including artillery and tanks in insurgency operations. Even in Jammu and Kashmir, artillery has been used on Pakistan troops supporting infiltration of terrorists from across the border. But if the operational situation warrants, Army will not hesitate to use all available forces, including tanks and artillery, in any situation. Even the IPKF had used tanks and gunships in Jaffna operations for shock effect or in critical situations like encirclement. When insurgents fight as conventional forces supported by artillery, as LTTE did in the Elam War, use of maximum force by the army is inevitable. There is no point in comparing methods of India and Sri Lanka in fighting the LTTE because they had different strategic and objectives and operational mandates. In the case of IPKF, it was limited to disarm Tamil militant groups as part of Indo-Sri Lanka Accord. The LTTE's refusal to comply and its use of weapons against civilians and other Tamil militant groups which had surrendered their weapons. So, IPKF military action was limited to disarm LTTE so that its ability to intervene with the normal life of citizens is curtailed or stopped. For instance, this is how we restored, Indian Army restored electric supply, the telecom facilities, normal functioning of banks, and opening of railway links. All this happened because we managed to do just that minimum to get life through, not to eliminate LTTE. Of course, LTTE, in the process, LTTE's back was broken. Prabhakaran and his followers had to take refuge in Alampil jungles in Vanni. And at a point, he became desperate. So he decided to collaborate with the sworn enemy of Tamil militants, that is President Premadasa, to get the Indian troops off his back. But Sri Lanka forces are fighting against the LTTE because it had challenged the sovereignty and unity of Sri Lanka. The LTTE effectively neutralized any chances of Tamil and Sinhala polity peacefully resolving the issue, rather resolving their differences. The LTTE's armed separatist struggle was indirectly aided by Sri Lanka's confused leadership, which for a long time was looking only for band-aid solutions. Of course, Rajapaksa came and the rest is history. He changed the narrative to defeat LTTE. Much as he says, Shyam Saran says, much as you may malign Rajapaksa, I also believe, for his method in the Elam War, I also believe it was his single-minded focus on eliminating the LTTE, freed the nation from the coercive threat of the LTTE, which is an extra-constitutional force that had drained the nation's energies for 2.5 decades.
So in order to gain accountability and justice in Sri Lanka, I think the most viable approach, it won't be criminal prosecution, because the civilians won't stand for it. The Sinhalese civilians, and if you really want to criminally prosecute, the Tamil civilians won't stand for it, because you'd have to prosecute, former LTTE commanders, the ones that are still alive. But I think the most viable method for gaining accountability and justice in Sri Lanka would be a Truth and Reconciliation Commission carried out with UN independent oversight, where both the Sri Lankan government and LTTE perpetrators would publicly testify to the crimes they have committed. However, depending on the scope of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the timeline, ROE and IPKF may also be asked to testify for human rights abuses they had committed and or were responsible for. If such a Truth and Reconciliation Commission would come forth, would someone like yourself be willing to publicly testify to the broader Sri Lankan public and talk about the crimes committed by the Indian Peacekeeping Force in Sri Lanka?
I don't know. There is actually, you should ask this, there is a branch called the Adjutant General's branch, which handles this issue of prisoners of war and the rights of citizens in areas under control of civilians. And actually, you should pose the question to the Sri Lankan government, which was still running the government in northern and eastern province. They had policemen, they had the setup, they were supplying, public distribution system was there. Why didn't they do it? So asking Colonel Hariharan, of course, I don't mind coming up in any commission, but it would be futile. Conceptually, the idea, you see, it sounds very attractive. But you know what is happening what happened in South Africa, where it is touted as an example, where everybody says it has worked. It just has delayed the trauma, the effect of trauma of these things. It will take generations to heal. And in Kenya, they tried it. It has not worked. I can quote this example. It is an attractive thing. I am sure in Sri Lanka, they should actually attempt this. Because we are Asian nations, there are enough Asian intellectuals. You can do it as a process, international process. I have no objection. But again, if you bring Norwegians, while I don't want to bring in my views on extraneous issues, I think it is a very attractive idea because it has got a compact population, unlike India. Where India, it will not work. Very difficult. India is too big. It's a continent actually. It's like European Union with 22 states. So you can try this. It's a very attractive proposition. And to sell the idea, I suppose, you can include the period before and after IPKF and include IPKF also. I have no objection. You should not expect dramatic changes in human contact by mere confession. Because the Buddhist country particularly believes in karma, just as Hindus believe. The karmic theory itself says you have to undergo this, what you have sowed. So that if you don't do that, if you try to escape that process by simply confessing the Catholic style, I don't know how much it will have an effect on
Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, it's not only confessing, but also reparations to communities affected, like the Muslim community, perhaps Sinhalese who were displaced, Tamils as well for the initial state terrorism.
My my point is, Prasanna, by all means you have the commission, but don't link this to the reparation. It will never come in this lifetime. You have a process. I'm glad you cited the example of these guys, Muslims. They have not. Actually, I raised this issue when Mr. Rajapaksa, when he was president, he invited me once, among others, and I raised this issue. The attitude was the Muslims they have benefited from the conflict between Sinhalas and Tamils, and they have got more than what they deserve. This was the open attitude. I am sure he was reflecting the general mood, because the others were sitting in the talk. It was not a personal talk or something. So I am saying, by all means, many have been denied the due compensation, though they are innocent of involvement in the conflict. They have been what Americans fancily call collateral damage, and be done with it. They are the collateral damage of conflicts. So in Sri Lanka you had 29 years of conflict. So you must do this. I am all for it. But my only submission is, don't link the benefits to the existing population till they die. Give it now and here. That's what I am saying. So if you have a confrontational dialogue continuing, that will not come. That's what I have been telling. Veeram bodadu vivekam vandam நான் சொல்லிட்டே இருக்கேன். I have been telling all the guys, it's not enough if you blood boil. I have negotiated with many groups. So I see you have incremental achievements that will encourage guys who are negotiating and those who are affected to talk further. That's how you should do.
So then you would agree, in contrast to criminally prosecuting them, the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, would probably be more viable as opposed to criminally prosecuting them.
It is a faster process. You can criminally prosecute within the country. But who will decide when there is a trauma of still in this generation, there is a leftover trauma in both sides due to the killings and deprivals.
Yeah, but I mean, of course, nobody would prosecute Mahinda Rajapaksa in Sri Lanka, or Gotabaya, or Seth Fonseca, or any of them. No Sinhalese would allow it. So that's why I say that criminal prosecution is probably the least viable. So when the Tamil diaspora, they say, oh, we need to take Sri Lanka to the ICC. Well, if you take Sri Lanka to the ICC, you also have to prosecute Adal Balasingham, KP, you have to prosecute Colonel Karuna, you have to prosecute LTTE Castro, he was a deputy international secretariat. So you have to prosecute both criminals from the Tamil community and the Sinhalese community. And if you look at it, both Tamils and Sinhalese would vehemently oppose criminally prosecuting both Tamil and Sinhalese war criminals, because they're hypocrites. So that's why it's my position that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is probably the most viable if we want to gain some sense of accountability and justice.
In Hindi they say doodh ka doodh, pani ka pani. Then it will distinguish what is water and what is milk. I agree with you that on principle, but for heaven's sake, it is a very long process. And it has political implications in democracies where populism is the prime mover, not idealism. Ideology is already dead in politics. So my point is, it has to be like that. And there has to be, in Sri Lanka, actually there was a move. The South Africans also offered to assist and all, but nothing has come off. Because it's not a popular thing that the both sides have not plugged for this. and I don't know. So it is a cause worth taking up, I feel.